Okay, so number two is exploitation. And this isn't a particularly great one, but it's one that is obviously extremely important. It's just quite rare in sports science. Research must serve a scientific purpose, and it mustn't exploit people in vulnerable situations. So we mustn't conduct research just for the benefits of an institution, like, for example, Sussex Downs College, or for our own benefit. So this would be conducting a project to find out something that we want to find out, perhaps, but that has no real relevance in the scientific community. And this obviously is where we're just using people and exploiting them, which is where it comes in. And obviously there's a number of things here about taking advantage of people, maybe because of benefits to us, maybe causing harm that's completely unnecessary, maybe for our own pleasure, and also problems with the actual process of taking part in it. Yeah, so that's about it really. It's quite a rare one. One that's quite interesting is conflict of interest. Now, conflict of interest is quite often where we talk about using research to make money, and particularly where there's some sort of financial aspect. So this is particularly where maybe your research is being funded by someone, perhaps a company, and you're testing that company's products. And there you have a conflict of interest because the company are paying you to do the research. Therefore, they are going to want you to find the answer that they want. So, for example, some examples within sports science. One would be the Milk Council study, where a research article found that chocolate milk was as good as a recovery drink as some of the expensive commercial brands, which is quite a surprising finding. But when you look at the study, it's completely flawed, and the study was funded by the US Milk Council. So they were paying for a study and therefore wanted the researchers to find that milk would be better. Therefore, the researchers set up an unfair study which would prove the milk. Another one is some of the High Five articles, which are High Five is a commercial sports brand, a bit like Lucozade. And again, if you look at their research articles, they've conducted the research. And again, there's questions over how they've conducted their studies, and again, whether they've set them up in a particularly fair way. So anywhere where someone is carrying out some research and they have, a conflict of interest and they can't remain impartial or independent, this would be an issue. So we must make sure that all research is completely independent. Number 4 is data protection. This is quite straightforward, really. Obviously, all personal information that you're collecting from your subjects must be kept confidential. And obviously, personal information from subjects cannot be published or made available to the public unless they've given their express permission to do so. Actually doing this, though, is a lot harder. And the interesting one with this one, as we'll talk more when we look at legal issues, is that there's actually a law here, the Data Protection Act, which you must follow. So I've just taken a small section of the Data Protection Act out here, and it talks here about processing sensitive data must only take place when there's a benefit. So, for example, there's no need to ask people's medical history if they're just doing a simple questionnaire about their opinions. It's really important that obviously that personal data is not distributed to anyone that doesn't need it. It's important that it remains confidential. And the last one, interestingly, all of the personal information must be stored properly and securely. And this can obviously raise questions if you're just keeping your subjects' information sheets just in a folder, for example. It should be kept in some sort of locked cabinet where only you can access it. So we'll discuss more about that later on, but the Data Protection Act does bind you to keeping people's work and information private. The last one is an ethics committee. An ethics committee is basically a panel of people, a bit like the panel of judges on the X Factor, or like in the Dragon's Den. And they are formed of local specialists, local researchers, medical professionals, and they must approve your research before it goes ahead. So, for example, at the University of Brighton, if you were to conduct some high-level research, you would have to face the ethics committee with your work, with your plans, and they would have to give it the go-ahead before it's allowed. So they usually ask to see all the paperwork, so the consent forms, the subject information sheets, basic things like risk assessments, and they'll also ask information about your research project. And really it's their job just to work out whether or not it's ethical or it's not ethical. If they feel it's not ethical, then they may send you away to make some changes. If they feel it's really, really flawed, they could just prevent you from taking